and I really want to honor and of course thank Abby first and foremost for her time joining us today. I'm going to get us kicked off, I think. I'm just going to share my screen and we are recording. Thank you, Rena. Let's get the party started here. All right. Okay. If you can just give me a thumbs up to make sure everyone can see my screen. For those of you who are on camera, perfect. Okay, great. So welcome everyone to our monthly member call. My name is Sarah Sterling, conveners.org. I'm the program catalyst. I've been working with conveners for about 2.5 years now. And today on our call, we're going to be talking about small virtual engagements. Just really quickly, for those of you who are not members of our community, just to give a little background information on who we are as an organization. Conveners.org, we're a small but very mighty virtual team. We have team members from all over the globe and who are working remotely from all over the globe. So luckily with COVID, we didn't have to pivot as much because we've always been a remote and agile team. But for example, I'm based in Guatemala City, Sarah Joy is in Colorado, Rena's in Canada currently, Ray is currently in Hawaii, and Missy is in Utah. So a little bit about who we are and what we do. If you look on our website, you'll see that we're a membership community first and foremost, as well as an advisory services consultancy. And what we do is we bring individuals and organizations who are passionate and focused on creating catalytic change in the world, positive change, obviously, to come together and collaborate, exchange resources, ideas, and create sustainable catalytic impact. And so we do that through these member calls, like the one that we're on right now, as well as we have a variety of membership benefits and services, lots of resources to support all of our members in their convenings. And by convening, I mean any way in which you as an individual or you as an organization bring people together into a common space to have conversations or trainings or just bringing people together. So that could look like event organizers, accelerators, incubators, fellowship programs, universities, impact investment funds, and other types of networks and services. We have a really, really robust, global, highly engaged, highly participatory community. So if you haven't joined us yet, I invite you to contact me, sarah@conveners.org, for more information about our membership community. And just some upcoming calls, especially for our members. We have on the 27th, our ATA Masterclass, and also ATA preview event. This is for Accelerating the Accelerators event. And May 18th is our all member, this is for members only, but our community is a practice call where we're gonna kick off our masterminds. So if you're a member, you should know what that means. If not, please contact me so I can add you to that call on May 18th. And then June 20th, looking forward into the next month, we'll have our monthly member call again, which is all about cultivating empathy with Annette Mason from Trilogy Design Works. So if you have any questions about any of these events, especially if you're not a member yet, please contact me. And so it's my honor and pleasure, and I'm just so excited to have Abby on this call with us. She's a senior leader programs director for Conscious Capitalism. You can find out more on their website on www.consciouscapitalism.org. She is actually going to be leading us in our first activity today. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing screens here so that she can describe our icebreaker, which she told me about and I hadn't heard of before. And I think it's just so cool and it's going to be really fun. So take it away, Abby.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate that. And I do love this icebreaker intro. I've done it now a couple of times in different groups, and I feel like it's always successful. I feel like now that we're in our home space, a lot of us are, it's even better, although you can do it in an office or anywhere, but I think it's particularly impactful for if you happen to be at home. So we can jump into that. Basically what we're going to do is, in a moment, I'm going to set my alarm for 60 seconds, and I'm going to give everyone 60 seconds to physically get up and move, or however you need to move, even if it's just turning around, and to pull something from your surroundings that represents hope for you, or makes you feel hopeful. It could be hopeful about the world, hopeful about your organization, hopeful about your family, however you interpret the thing that makes you feel hopeful. You're going to physically take that thing and put it in your lap, put it on your desk, whatever's in front of you. And then we're going to do an exercise around that. So everyone understand what they're to do here when I set my alarm. 60 seconds. You're going to go and retrieve something that makes you feel hopeful. And go. 20 seconds in. "30 seconds." Everyone has their screens off, so I don't know if they're back sitting at their desk yet or if they're all frantically running around looking for something. There's Sarah back. All right.
Went to the car and it was locked.
Seconds. I love it. I see a plant.
Oh.
10 seconds. Okay. All right. Time is up. Awesome. So what I would love to do, we have how many people here? 14. Let's, if you can do breakout rooms, maybe 3. And we're just going to get into breakout rooms. You're going to show off your item and you're going to share what it is about that makes you feel hopeful. And we'll have, gosh, I think we have, how long is this session supposed to be? You can do maybe like 7 or 8 minutes, Sarah. Does that work? Yeah, so it's like 7 or 8 minutes. We'll put you in. I imagine there'll be like a minute warning. So feel free to, to spend a couple of minutes sharing why your item is important to you. And of course, take the time if you have it to do a quick introduction of yourself and the organization you're with. And that's it. And we'll see you back in 8.
Perfect. Rena, can you help me get those set up? And just really quickly, for those of you who've never used Zoom Breakout, you'll go automatically. So we'll see you back here in a second.
They're going.
Yeah, yeah, there you go. Exactly. In action, what I'm describing. Perfect. Thanks. Oh, perfect. The echo is gone. Great. Well, I'm going to let Abby continue to lead the icebreaker activity.
Does anyone want to share out? Does anyone have something that they want to share with the whole group about what their item was and why it made them feel hopeful? Maybe a couple, 2 or 3 people. We had some good ones in ours. I can start if it makes people feel more comfortable. Mine was my vaccine card. And for all of the reasons of obviously being able to get back into the world and kind of the collectivism that is people coming together to be willing to, to basically support humanity is in a time where there's so much division, I think is what something that makes me feel hopeful. Sarah, I saw you with your photo up of your little one. So sweet. How could that not make you feel hopeful? I can't even imagine.
Her passport photo. So the shock of the flash in her face, and then she cried the rest of the time. So that's the only photo we were able to get. But yes, that's Mia, our baby girl, Mia.
Yeah. Does anybody else want to share before we hop in? Everybody's feeling shy about their item. Okay, I won't force you. All right, let's move into it. So if you want to share the first slide of the deck, I'm having Rena show my deck because I have one very small laptop that I'm working off of, and having notes and things is challenging. So bear with me while I navigate all of that. So just in terms of why this conversation, we as an organization, I'm with Conscious Capitalism, Inc. So we are a nonprofit / movement for business leaders, primarily mid-market size business leaders who are, our mission is to elevate humanity through business. So we work with business leaders who are trying to learn and understand our framework, which consists of 4 tenets, and how to live those out through their business and bake it into the DNA of the organization. So we're just community-wise, we're working primarily with like senior leaders, CEOs of businesses. When COVID did its thing, reared its ugly head. We had a big event plan that we normally have in the fall, and we basically took that opportunity to run a bunch of test virtual engagements to see how they go, and I'll talk about more of those as we go. But we've done about maybe like, I don't know, 30 or 40 different kinds of sessions since August, which has kind of sparked my interest in this topic. And from what I understand about this session, I'm not here necessarily to tell anyone what they should do, but to spark the discussion, because we've learned some things. We have a lot more to learn, and I would love to hear from all of you in terms of what is and is not working for you. So for the reasons of like why small gatherings, I know that lots of us have our community right now, which we'll get into, is basically around like 125 people, so it's not huge. I know that people in this group have from hundreds, probably to thousands of people in their communities, and I feel like if there's one thing that I've learned from Zoom land of the past year, it's that creating opportunities for more, taking your big groups and making them small, just creates more intimacy, and you're able to have conversations that really just are not possible in larger groups. People are really drawn to feeling, obviously we all want to feel connected, and the big groups are just really challenging for that. So putting people into small groups just allows for that. Logistically, I find with Zoom or whatever platform you're using, there's less talking over one another. When there's a small group, you put 100 people in the room. Even I would say we have found like over a dozen starts to put people into that awkward space of like, no one wants to say anything because they're afraid they're going to interrupt somebody. So then everyone's just, as we just maybe just saw a few moments ago, right? Everyone's like, oh, are you going to say something? I don't know. Should I not? Then you have hand raise functions and it becomes very formal. So those smaller groups, I think, allow logistically for more connections to be made. And then for us, I would say testing new ideas just feels less risky. You can try something new with 1,000 people and like bless you for doing that. But to me, it feels way safer to come to a group of 6 people and say, hey, here's a thing. Don't know if it's going to work. Let's give it a shot. And people, I think, feel more comfortable that they're in just a small group, and I kind of feel like they're in on the behind the scenes and helping us to create content. So I found that to be true. You can pop to the next slide. So I'll just give you a little bit of a background of what happened for us over the past few months. In whatever it was, we decided we weren't going to do our CEO summit, probably fairly early on, April or May. And we decided to use this time to test a bunch of small group gathering content. So we created this advisory team, which is actually fantastic. And if there's anyone who's like trying to think about programming or introducing new things into their community, I actually really recommend this if you have a community who's willing to do it. We invited folks in our community in to kind of be a part of this advisory team, and tested out a series of small virtual events from August to December. We surveyed after each one, did like a very quick 2-question NPS just to get feedback. We held monthly meetings for the full group, but we would also within that full group bring people into small group breakout sessions to ask them a bunch of questions and get feedback. We would have phone calls with people and ask them. So we really got our community involved with giving us feedback to help create content that was valuable to them, both in the content and in the format of the programming. It was fantastic. So if you have an opportunity to do that, highly recommend, like, use the people you have. They want to help you to create content. So after all of that, we decided, yes, this is amazing. Let's launch a network. And now we have paying members who are looking for value. So we adjusted the programming based on the feedback we got from the advisory team. And now we're running the network, doing ongoing monthly programming. I have ABC, always be checking in. So continuously doing NPS scoring after every session, having conversations with people. We're going to start utilizing a customer success team member. So basically having a person who's dedicated to reaching out to our community members and checking in with them, what's working, what's not, how do we make this better, what do you need, et cetera, to just continue to make sure that the content that we're providing is valuable to them. Next slide. So this is what we came up with for the 3 main kinds of small group gatherings we're doing. And as I have noted here, we have far from figured it out. So this is what we're doing right now for the past few months. So we have deep dive conversations. So what we do is we're providing public content to the public. So we have sessions every couple of weeks that are conscious capitalism related topics, business leaders speaking about, leading their businesses in this way. They do a virtual session, whether that's a fireside chat or a keynote. It's typically a fireside chat because those do tend to be better. People respond better to them virtually, we have found. And then a week later, we do a deep dive for just our network members. So they get to sit down virtually in a small group session with the person who presented the keynote the week prior. They've watched the recording, they come into them, it's like an ask me anything session. These have been really, really popular. People really like access to a person who is a thought leader, a practitioner of whatever you're doing, and being able to have access to them in a small group setting has been really, really valuable. And I'll get into a little bit later about the elements of it that can make it a little bit hit or miss, but those have been great. The second thing are brain trust calls, which kind of resemble what we're doing here. It's supporting a fellow network member with a question, challenge, or topic they want to discuss. So this facilitates getting like-minded people together and builds relationships. It's sort of like what you're doing in conveners with the mastermind groups, and then the affinity. It's focused around that. Originally, we had, I would say, several different options that we consolidated into these, because what I've learned is keep it simple, simple. So that's why we focused on these 3. The last thing is the conscious leadership mastermind circles. These used to just be mastermind circles, which for those of you familiar with masterminds, it's basically gathering people together. This is the only thing we do where people meet the same, each month with the same group. It's really designed for personal and professional development and building deeper relationships. Those were just mastermind circles. We made them conscious leadership mastermind circles in order to focus in on the topic, to be on one of our tenets versus to be really broad, because I think it was very confusing to have it just be this very largely focused or unfocused gathering. So these are the 3 things that we're primarily doing right now. Okay. Next. Challenges. So inconsistent attendance, which we were talking about in our breakout room. That could be because the subject matter might not be interesting to a lot of people. Maybe the host isn't super interesting to people. Scheduling is very challenging. Busy folks, this is the time the thing is at. You can make it or you can't make it. We have challenges with explaining the session before people attend. I wanted to shake people and be like, just show up to one and then you'll understand what it is. You're like, well, what is it? What? Just come to one and then you'll see. So I feel like getting people to just do that first trial, to kind of the early adopters that come in and say, got it, I understand what it is. Now when I'm invited to this, I know what it is. That has been challenging for us. And Michaela, who's on this call as well, we've been trying to find different ways to use how to change the language, how to kind of exemplify that for people, so they really feel like they understand it and they understand why they should sign up for it. Inequitable voices or self-promoting, always a challenge when you have, even when you have 6 or 7 people in the room, there's often 1 or 2 people who want to be the ones to ask all the questions. It's challenge for us. I would say for self-promotion, it's really not a huge deal, but if you have even 1 person who's doing that, it really taints things for everyone. So I think having a plan for being able to address people who might be doing that is important. We're working on that now. It's the question of attendance, to record or not to record. So we haven't been recording our sessions because part of the opportunity was we wanted to be this small, intimate situation where you could say anything you wanted and you wouldn't be on the record. And we were using Chatham House rules and don't repeat anything anyone says, which is great if you're in the room. But then all of those other people who are in the network don't get access to that because they weren't able to make it at that time. So we are just trying to figure out now whether we should adjust that. I surveyed the group. It was 50-50, which was super not helpful. So I think what we're going to start doing, or at least try doing, is at the beginning of each of the sessions, poll the group, just use a Zoom to poll the group and say, is there anyone in this room who does not want this to be recorded and shared? And if even 1 person anonymously says no, we don't record. And if everyone says, yes, this is no problem, record, great. And then we have that content to share out later. We'll see how that works. But it's just an idea that we have to kind of address that. So we do have people who don't show up and say, I mean, we ask all the time, is there a recording or is there a recording? No, we don't do recordings. It's supposed to be XYZ. But then they kind of check out because they realize that they're not really going to be able to appreciate the content because they can't make it. How much facilitation is the right amount of facilitation? We have tried as much as possible to let the members lead themselves and not have us kind of do too much facilitation. But I also think that as I'm watching the small groups, people want structure. So adding in that facilitation in some way, I think it will be a next step for us, is figuring out, I usually come in and give an introduction. This is how the session will go. In this case, like, no recordings, ask all the questions, introduction to the person, unmute yourself, ask all the things, et cetera, et cetera. But I will do things like at the end, 10 minutes before the end of the session, I'll kind of pop in and say, hey, Sarah and Jenna, I realize, I know that I haven't heard from your voices. I just want to, say your names in case there is a question that you want to ask, because not everyone is as comfortable jumping in. And sometimes we use the hand raise option, but it also kind of creates a little bit more formality than we're really looking for. So how much facilitation is right? And then just a different wants and needs. We have people come to our community for a wide variety of reasons. So being able to figure out the content that's going to best serve the largest number of people is a constant challenge. I can pause for a second if anybody wants to say anything about what I've shared or ask questions or share your perspectives of similar things that you've done. Open to that.
Here's a quick question. What constitutes small?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say, I think that when we've done sessions that have about a dozen people, that starts to get to be big. So I think it really needs to be ideally 10 and under, to where people in the room, where it has that intimacy. Obviously, if you're doing a big event, you can bring people into breakout rooms and create small groups. We've all seen that. We just did that. But I think there's something to having like an hour, in a small group, where it's not just like you're kind of popped into something, then you're popped out, and you're popped back in, you're popped out, but actually having the whole experience being with just a small group. So I would say less than 10 is ideal. Someone had a question in the Sarah. What virtual platforms do we use? We've just been using Zoom, to be honest. We looked into a few other ones, but we didn't really necessarily, we use, Zoom meetings for sure. Meetings for anything that's a small group, for sure. Meetings. We want everyone to be able to see each other. I don't know if anyone's familiar with, I think that you guys did a showcase for circles, right? With Dan Hoffman. Yeah. We were talking to them at one point, but we couldn't see the value in terms of the expense when we didn't have enough information yet to know whether that was something that was really going to be a wow for our folks. So since we had the contract with Zoom already, and it works well enough for that, but I do think that what's cool about circles or other platforms like that is if someone's on Zooms all day long, it's nice to come on something that looks a little bit different and the interface is a little bit different. For some people, that's a frustration because they're like, oh my goodness, like I know how to use Zoom and now you're making me come into this new thing and I don't know how to do this and I don't know where all the buttons are. So I think it depends on the group that you're with as to whether or not it's an advantage to use something that's different and unique or whether it's just more confusing. For our folks who are, senior leaders, like they just want to get the job done. They're not super into the bells and whistles. We did use Wonder once at the end of we did have a larger group gathering and we tried to use that for at the end for people to move around. I didn't get like a ton of information because I wasn't able to move around, but people were not in there for that long. And I was like, that's probably not a great sign that they didn't stick around. So I may try to use it again. I do love it. I mean, I think it's great. We use it for our team. I think it's super fun. Again, I think it's a matter of with that group, helping them understand how to navigate around it, which I did. I gave them a whole spiel, but TBD. So those are the ones that we've tried. Any other questions?
I'm curious a little bit about how you market these smaller events. Do you market them as smaller events so that people have an expectation, or yeah, can you tell me a little bit more about that? Additionally, like, do you target different parts of your audience in order for different gatherings?
Yeah. Well, what we're doing right now is, since we have this new network, like you're a member, so similar to conveners, if you're in the network, you get invitations to everything. So we started using, I was doing things via email, like using Yam, like a mail merge, to just email blast people, because I found that our community members are more inclined to open an email from us than like a newsletter. We've kind of begun tag teaming that, because some people are like, oh my gosh, there's so much text in this email. Like, I can't read all the descriptions of all the various sessions. And I'm like, okay, but you don't want to read all of that. This other person, like, everyone wants something different. So we've basically been doing both, where we do our first announcement via constant contact and newsletter. It's very graphic heavy, without a lot of detail about the sessions, just like a title and the type in a short description and a registration button that takes you there, and there's more information there. And then doing emails that don't have graphics, but have more description. So that basically, regardless of what your sort of learning style or your patient's style is for reading communications, hopefully I feel like that's been best for us so far, has been doing kind of the both. Because I'll see, like, we get a burst and I get a burst from a different group, and I'm like, it was the same communication with the same information, but you just preferred this or that. But it is being brought to the whole group. And we want to start, as we continue to build out, we're definitely talking about, with those customer success people who are really there to get to know our members really, really well, and do like monthly check-ins with them and get them on the phone and like really dig in further, to be able to have a stronger idea of what the content that they want is, and like if there's other kinds of engagements that people are looking for. Like, I know we have people who are interested in affinity, right? Like, oh, we have people in the restaurant industry and like, we would love to do something together. I'm like, that's great, but there's only a small percentage of you in this network that are in that industry. So if you guys want to do that and invite people from the outside, you can do that, but not necessarily everyone who's in this group is going to be interested in your particular affinity. So is that helpful at all?
Yeah, that's definitely helpful. I think one question that I still have is like about the language of marketing it as a small group gathering or group conversation versus like, versus not including that type of kind of information.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely try to use words like small group, conversation, discussion, peer-to-peer. Like, as much as I can, I use language that gives people the idea that like you'll be sitting, I'll say things like, so for the deep dive, I use a description of, because a lot of these folks we know from conferences. So I'll say, it's like going to a conference and seeing someone on stage, which is what our virtual gatherings are, the public session, and then sitting down and having dinner with them afterwards with a group of people. That's basically, like, I try to give them the visual or the experiential thing of what it would be like virtually. So as much as we can do to try to like get them. And again, I do think that when they hear that, they're more inclined to show up. And I'll say this, there are some people who are like, oh gosh, that's like, you want me to be in a room with people, I have to be totally tuned in, I can't just kind of be half listening. Like, I'm sure that there's people who say like, I cannot attend this thing because I can't be fully engaged, but we don't want those folks there if they're not. So it kind of weeds those folks out if they're not able to really be there. So
Thanks, that's super helpful. And I really love the like example of using experiential language in order to make it more clear about what the gathering might be like. I think sometimes I see drop-offs from people when they do have to do that personal interaction, but trying to set it up of like, it's like getting FaceTime in front of X, Y, and Z after a conference is really helpful. So thank you.
yeah, for sure. A lot of conversation in the Madison. Oh, these are some breakouts. I love that. Yep, all kinds of good icebreakers.
We got a little.
And I'll say this. Oh, go ahead.
I'm so sorry. I got a little spotty at some point, so it's possible that you addressed this when you were answering Julia. But one thing that, like, off the top of my head that I would be a little worried about on the marketing side is like accidentally getting too many people for something that's supposed to be a small group discussion. Do you have any thoughts or recommendations around that?
Yeah, that was, well, two things. One, that was kind of how I learned about the 12 was too much, was that we had about 13. We had someone coming in who was a well-known CEO from a well-known brand, and everyone was super excited about it, and a lot of people signed up. And we did get some feedback that it was just too many people. So honestly, if I see that coming, or as we scale and we have more people, I'll probably make a wait list and just cap it and just let people know that we're capping it. And the concern with that, because I did this once before, the challenge with that is that if we probably usually have about a third drop off, the same, even with a small group, we have that with a big group, everyone signs up for this event and whatever it is, we still with a small group will have that drop off where people don't show up. So I would build in, for a small group where I say I only want a max of 12, I would probably set a wait list at like 15 or 16 with the expectation that a few people in the last minute will get pulled away and not able to attend. So the biggest thing with that is you have someone who doesn't attend, someone who's in a wait list, and if they don't tell you that they're not attending, then that wait list spot doesn't get opened up. So that is a challenge that I haven't really figured out. But I think building in a few people into the wait list with the expectation that people will drop off is one way to mitigate that. And it creates some urgency, right? It's like, oh my gosh, like so many people want to attend this. I better jump in and register. But then you also get those folks that are like, I'll jump in and register whether or not I know if I can attend or not, just to get my name on the list. So I think that for us, when that happened, I did send out a communication a couple of days before. And I said, hey, we do have a lot of people who are signed up for this particular session. If you're unable to come, please just pop me over an email so that I can reach out to the folks that are on our wait lists. And people did. People were like, oh, something came up, I can't come. Please release my spot. So it's extra work because I have to manually, go in and like send an email to someone, can you come? But if it's an amazing session, like it's worthwhile, right? Because they're adding value for people. So they're excited to get that invite.
I have a question that might be kind of both for Abby and more for Sarah. Sarah, are there any things that Abby talked about from the convener's perspective? I know you are hosting a lot of member events and then also some events that are more public facing for new people to come in and check out the member experience. Are you seeing more members showing up or new people coming in to check out your work? And is there anything else about what Abby's talked about that you're seeing also reflected in your work?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. And I would echo a lot of what Abby's saying in terms of sort of, we don't like to use the word best practice, but we call them practice pearls, I believe. Sarah Joy uses that terminology. So like pearls of wisdom. But it's an interesting question because it really depends on the topic. So we've found, like, even with member calls, sometimes there are more prospective members than actual members who show up. It just depends on what's relevant for people, kind of what Abby was saying too, just like who shows up depends on like the speaker, the topic, and the timing too, because what we found as well is you really need to time your topics, at least for us, along with the convening calendar. So like if we want to talk about sponsorship and challenges around finding sponsorships for virtual versus hybrid versus in-person convenings, you have to do that earlier in the year, because if you do it by mid-year, you're basically talking about the next year for most people. And so I think for us, timing is a really big key one. We've also toyed with doing more member-only calls. Like I mentioned in this call, we have a member-only call coming up to create those communities of practice and masterminds, which will be completely closed and only for members, to create that sense of trust and community just for our membership community. And those will be meeting regularly once a month, or as often as the group, the masterminds, want to meet. And then we also do our ecosystem calls, which are open to everyone. And for those ecosystem calls, I would say it's about half and half usually. And we do shoot for that for the ecosystem calls, just because while it's a service we provide for free to everyone, we also want to make sure that our members are taking advantage of that as well. So I think the big question for me is always, how do we create a space that is engaging, inviting, inclusive, but also safe? for both our members and for people who are interested in becoming members, because especially these member calls really showcase what our membership community is all about. And so we want to invite, people who are non-members to come as well, to share in that. So yeah, it's definitely a balance. And yeah, I would say again, timing and everything. And we do have a ton of activities, and I'm so glad that we're sharing. There's a lot of like new activities here that we can add to our resources. But just to like create community and build trust, we have a lot of those that work both virtually and in person. But these suggestions are really great, and including the icebreaker we did today with Abby, the scavenger hunt. Little things like that I think go a long way. So I'll stop there.
I do have a couple more slides if you want to just bounce back to that, and then we can just leave whatever last few minutes up for questions. I love maybe it will be helpful. So here's some things that we've learned. So integrating appreciative inquiry and breakouts, which I feel like this group fully gets, like the idea of appreciative inquiry, asking questions, figuring out what the right questions are to ask people to get them engaged and involved. There's an organization or a group called Exchange, the Exchange community. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that, like Exchange. It's an appreciative inquiry like training program and community. If anyone is interested in like really digging deeply into appreciative inquiry, I would definitely recommend it. They've been great. They let me sit through one of their multi-day trainings and it was fantastic. So if you're super fired up about like how to build community and connection through appreciative inquiry, like for sure, and I can send you that information if you want. Finding ways to bring every voice into the room, whether that's hand raising, saying names, like I mentioned earlier, but that's super important, is you never want to have a group where the same folks are always speaking and the same folks are always quiet, unless that's something that people really want. If they really are like, I really genuinely only want to come in here and listen, like that's just, I'm not comfortable doing that. So maybe understanding your community and what their needs are. Later heavy facilitation helps. People need structure and to know what to expect. So like I said before, figuring out what that structure is for your folks. Some people do want that heavy. They want you to be like, okay, now we're doing this, now we're doing this, now we're doing this. Like that just helps them flow, especially if you have folks who are like on the, maybe not as comfortable jumping in. They would really want that extra facilitation and support. Creating opportunities for vulnerability or personal connection. I think that, psychological safety, like Sarah is saying, is super, super important. The most successful of any of these sessions ends up with someone who's able to share something that is personal or a real challenge or get some sort of support around that, is like always the most successful. So it's a challenge for us, is figuring out how to do that, especially when you're switching groups. It's not always the same for some of our groups. It's a different group every time. So how do you create that within the network, within your community as a whole? How do you set the stage that's just how, that's the ecosystem you've created, is that this is how we are in our space. And we're still working on that as well. And then prep your hosts and participants. So, Community does a great job of that. Have a phone call talking about, this is what to expect if you're hosting, this is what you should do, what you shouldn't do. Prepping your participants when you get onto a call. I think in the beginning, I used to just kind of be like, hey, everyone's out here, like kind of casual, like do your thing. And people were like, we need to know exactly what we're supposed to be doing in this space. So making, not to take into, what's I'm looking for? You know what I'm saying? Make sure that people know, take it for granted. Don't take it for granted that people know what to expect when they come into a space, or they know how to act. Give them that guidance. And then the last slide I think I have here is just, some question prompts, which I think we've been doing pretty well on, but I'll just say, what small virtual gatherings have you held? What works and what doesn't? What are your challenges? What are creative ways to bring people together virtually and in small groups? How do you create that psychological safety in a virtual world? And what do you find most valuable for a small group virtual engagement when you're the participant? Like, what have you seen that has been really fantastic? Questions? That's it. I'm reading Sarah's notes on the side. Yeah, I love, you guys do a really good job of that, of the different learning styles and the music and the visuals and cameras on and off. That's fantastic. Getting people in the mood
Yeah,
for
Ashley got me thinking about different things. So I wanted to make sure I shared
Yeah,
them
I
as they came to
yeah. Different senses. Yeah. I mean, I love, for me, like I'll be honest, I'm an in-person event person. Like we're doing these all right now. And I'm like, I just, whatever, get me back into a room where I'm running around with clipboard. Like that's my happy space. That's my zone of excellence. So this has really been a challenge for me to do the virtual thing. So, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that it forces me to take what I know about being together in person and figure out, it's not, and again, we all know it's not about replicating that in a virtual world, but how to create the same experience, the same response, right? The like, oh my gosh, I feel connected, I feel heard, I feel safe, all of those feelings in a virtual space, when we're also used to being now, in front of a camera, it's a challenge, but it's the fun part.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that. And I think it's really interesting to think that, for some people being in person is almost terrifying. And I know that I'm an introverted extrovert and really have to but I love being in person because it pushes me to go outside of my comfort zone and really engage with people. And as long as it's shorter periods of time, I'm totally fine. And then I can recharge in the evenings. So I'm not going out karaoke, well, sometimes, but at the after parties after the conference is over, now I'm usually too exhausted. Although with COVID, it's you have one small gathering with friends now that people are getting vaccinated, and you're like, I'm done for the rest of this month. I'm totally done. I did my social interaction. We go home. But it's interesting too with the virtual sense that you have to be a performer, because you can only see half the body, right? And also you have to make sure your lighting is perfect and your sound and all these things you didn't really have to think about when you're in person. And you can't always feel the vibe in the room as well, at least for me, as you can in person. So those are a lot of technical considerations to keep in mind too. And then just people get burned out staring. I know I get burned out staring at my face on the screen, along with everyone else's faces on a screen, versus being able to walk to different tables and interact with people.
So this thought is not so much a net impact experience. I'm a little new to the organization to speak too much about the virtual events we've done. But I did a lot of virtual facilitation last year as part of my last job. And a lot of the virtual facilitation I had to do involved a ton of information presenting. And that can be a lot to just sit in front of a screen and hear things being presented at you for long periods of time. So anytime I had a lot of content to cover with my group, I would just build into my slides or whatever discussion questions, and every 10 minutes or so be like, all right, we're gonna talk a little bit more about this, break people off into small groups and have people talk for 5 minutes, come back, and then keep going. As opposed to, okay, we're gonna have 40 minutes where you're just listening to me for a while and then we're gonna talk. Just because usually by the time that 40 minutes is done, people are burned out and they're tired and want to go. And they're probably not internalizing the content as well as they would be if they're talking about it with other people.
Yeah, that's a great point too. And I think I read somewhere, it might have been in Priya's book, that the adult attention span is about 7 to 10 minutes. And especially virtually, and I know I do this all the time, but you can go check your email while someone's talking. So I'll be in webinars all the time. And then if you were to ask me what people actually talked about, it's well, I know what the topic was and I was there, but I can't tell you detailed, unless I take notes while I'm listening. So yeah, that's a really good point too. And I think that's something Abby did really well in this conversation too, is let's stop and check in and have questions and then go back to the presentation slides. So you're incorporating all those different learning styles too, of visual, audio, interactive.
I love this idea, Melanie, of brain writing, where people can go off camera and write and reflect and then share. Something that it's something I'm actually thinking about we are doing an in-person event, believe it or not, in October. And I'm thinking about doing at the end of the day, creating space for journaling, just to give your people take notes during the day, right? But to give people space to just and like, what are my reflections on the notes that I've taken? What are the actions I need to take? It's like, okay, this thing I need to call my blah, blah, blah person on the team and tell them we want to do X, Y, Z. So just building in more space in general. I feel like sometimes virtually it feels funny to do that. So like, oh, we're all just here looking at each other and we're just going to like sit down and do that. But I think I like the idea of saying like, turn your camera off. It's okay to do that. And we'll give you a prompt to do that and then come back. I like that.
Yeah, thanks. And I found that to be really effective. And, you know, I think most of us want to go back in person, and we don't see many sort of advantages of virtual. But one thing my team has been talking about with virtual, we have a lot more chat, right? Like when you're in a ballroom, you're not getting chat. And so what is the way, and journaling would be one way, I think, where you're getting people to reflect, because people are less likely to reflect in person, right? Or comment. Obviously, you don't want them talking during the session, but how do you take the best of virtual into in person? Anyway.
Yeah.
My team hosted an annual recognition event virtually, and we built into the script chat prompts like as things were happening on screen. So everything was pre-recorded, but we wanted people to get engaged. And so right at the beginning, we planted our board members to start the chat conversation and kind of just get that vulnerability moving. And then like 10 minutes in, as we started doing the chat box, maybe every 8 or 10 minutes, kind of similar to what Jana had said about just attention span, just like bringing people back in if they were maybe zoning out. And then we got a lot of people in the chat box responding to the event. And it was, I think, a really positive experience.
Ashlyn, what platform did you use for that enabled you to do the simultaneous sort of commenting wall? I know you said you pre-recorded, but if anyone has like other platforms that they use that allow you to do that live, if you're live streaming or pre-recorded.
We just used Zoom Meeting because we wanted everyone to be able to do both like grid screens so they could see everybody, or just watch it. So we just kind of made that choice for back and forth ability for people. But we were able to pin the video. So if folks just like wanted to just watch that they could do that.
Well, we are at time for today's conversation. I just want to honor all of your schedules. Yeah, it went by really quick. This conversation, I feel like we could talk about this for many more hours, but thank you so much, Abby, for your time, taking the time to help us with this conversation. And hopefully everyone got a lot of new sort of resources and activities that they can use. Please feel free to reach out to me with, any questions that you may have or additional challenges. And then we'll also be sending a recap email early next week, and a blog post to kind of sum up what we talked about today. And we'll also have the recording available for members. So thank you everyone again for your time. Stay safe, stay healthy, and please keep in touch. Talk soon. Have a great weekend.